Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Lance LeFort. I run a boutique consulting firm specializing in digital production. Along with some VES members and assistants from others in the community, we've put together this panel tonight to discuss strategies for coping through challenges in the VFX industry. These challenges could be related to a current event or any challenge related to a shortage of work, family crisis, or anything where an employee may need assistance or advice. We'll provide some phone numbers and other resource links near the end of the discussion for anyone interested. We'll have a panel discussion tonight followed by some Q&A. Please send your questions into the provided Zoom chat or in the Q&A window, and I'll have a look at them and we'll tackle them at the end of the presentation. Our talk tonight has been the work of several VES members and colleagues in the VFX industry. I'd like to thank all of them for their countless volunteer hours in preparation for tonight, and thank everyone on the panel as well for taking time to participate as well. Also like to add that while we have a mental health practitioner on our panel, we advise that anyone reach out directly for help to their doctor or other healthcare professionals as needed. We're not dispensing specific medical advice or direction in that area tonight. Our panel tonight will be discussing tactical ideas, strategies, and covering a broad range of topics at a general level. Again, not meant to be medical advice. We're going to talk about our personal experiences, but we hope some of this content will be applicable to people in this industry and others as well. Without further ado, let me introduce your panel tonight. Alycia Burns, HR Manager at WeFX Studio. Kim Davidson, CEO and President of SideFX Software. Kate Zagorarsis, FX artist and VFX professor. Mihaela Angel, psychotherapist at Rethink Psychotherapy Services. Geoff Scott, VFX supervisor. Lawrence Simet as well is hiding in the background. He may jump in at some point later in the conversation. First question for the panel tonight. Anyone who's been in the industry for several years has experienced some ups and downs from time to time. Sometimes there's almost too much work and too much crunch, and other times it's the reverse. Whether it be studios getting closed, work slowdowns, project cancellations, or other major interruptions. Panel, what would your advice be to a recent graduate or someone still relatively new to the industry with regards to things like their mindset or outlook right now? Anyone want to jump on that and take that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start.
Thanks, Geoff.
I'll just start with a story. When I graduated back in '96, the industry took a major nosedive. All the medium-sized studios in LA had basically shuttered their doors. They couldn't cope with the switch between special effects and visual effects. The cost of the computers was too much. And I mean, I literally just gotten married and thought it was kind of the end of the world. I'd gotten a job for about a month and a half at a video game company. One day I showed up and people were, walking out with chairs and computers because they hadn't been paid in a month and a half. And I thought it was the end of the world. That's to say, this too shall pass. I've been working now almost consistently for 25 years. And it seems, really daunting at first, but you'll make it through.
Yeah, I'll add to your sentiment. So when I started in the industry, it was almost like a couple months before COVID hit. So it was my first big VFX job, and then all of a sudden COVID happened. I still remember exactly when the news was blowing up about it, where a few of us would all go to the gym together, and I remember standing in the gym, getting all my stuff packed to go back to the office, and looking up at this TV screen going, that will never get to Canada. We're safe for now. And then the next day it was everybody go home. And it was really rough on a lot of people during that time. And I just remember feeling relieved in a way, because I was like, oh my gosh, I just moved to Toronto as well. So I think during the height of the first wave of COVID, I just moved to Toronto, got into my new place, had never really lived in Toronto before. And so I was kind of relieved in a sense where I was like, oh my gosh, I can go for a 2-hour run across the city and just like see everything. But everything was just closed. So it was a little disappointing in that way. So my social life in the industry was gone. My connection to my coworkers were gone, minus the ones that I kept in touch with during that time. And I just remember how overwhelming it was. And then also the burnout wave from my first job, it was kind of overwhelming because burnout just goes up when you're at a studio, because it gets tense and tense and tense per production you're on. And then when it's over, you just get that wash of burnout like a month later. So during that first wave of COVID, I was just like, the burnout hit me and I went, oh, this is what burnout is. And so I kind of was, because it was a safe environment and nothing was happening, it was actually a really good way for me to kind of process that as a junior artist. And it was actually really useful looking back on it, for sure.
Hey, Geoff, I'd be interested. So you were like, oh, like, what was your tactics to survive? Like, did you kind of just twiddle your thumbs? Did you start applying to other types of jobs? What did you do?
Oh, well, back then, yeah. I mean, I literally applied to everything and anywhere. I mean, it was I'd switched to, again, I'd always wanted to get in visual effects, or games. You know, I find them both, you know, artistically challenging and, you know, the right kind of thing. I ended up getting a job at a company that did simulator rides, and I worked there for actually the first 2 years of my career. I basically started looking at everything from, you know, medical imaging. I'd even applied at a company called BioWare before they became a big game company, when they were literally just doing medical imaging. You know, to anything. There were a lot. In fact, actually, it was a choice between the simulator ride company and designing slot machines, because
Right.
literally there are a lot more people can do than just visual effects, you know, or animation. You know,
Yeah, it's like you didn't give up on the general career, but you've certainly widened your it sounds like your choices and then came back to the core. Like, is what you're doing now really what you wanted to be doing day one, or did you even know?
Yeah. No, I'd always gotten this business with the plan to make, you know, monsters and aliens and robots and spaceships, and then, you know, there's always hiccups in the way. You know,
so the point being here is that, you know, the detour didn't hurt you at all. I probably even broaden your education and knowledge base in a weird way.
Yeah, well, there was another time when and to talk about to Kate's point, I'd hit critical burnout about 16 years ago, and I said I was just done, and I wanted to leave film and television, and I went to video games, and I had the great fortune of my wife's English, so we moved to England, and I worked on at a games company that does AAA games, and so it was nice to learn a completely new industry after being in film and television for 8 to 10 years exclusively. And, you know, there are a lot of really good games companies now in Toronto. Back then, you know, there was a couple of studios, but not as much as there are now, for sure.
Right.
And Kim, I'm curious, do you occasionally have people from the industry work in SideFX on Houdini software, or do they migrate out of the company into the industry? Is it a one-way sort of direction? I'm curious. Similar to Autodesk, I've seen people jump into Autodesk sometimes for a few years and then jump back into production roles.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they jump back and forth. We were just talking about the interns that work at our office, and we've had interns for about since 1996, and they all are working in the industry, but some have come back and are working at SideFX. We find when people like kind of do have this burnout or quality of life, working in the software, we're pretty 9 to 5. We don't all of a sudden have these peaks and valleys and no work and lots of work and no work and lots of work. So we have a nice even. So when they come and they like the culture and we like them, they tend to stay. We have a very good retention rate. So mostly coming in, but to the points here, we faced a lot of tough times ourselves over the years, tighten our belts, that kind of thing, but certainly nothing like the artists that either have come to us or that we hear the stories, obviously, because we work with all the studios and game and film studios around the world. So this is not new. Hearing the burnout situations. This is being in the business since 1987. It's and actually having been an artist in the first 4 or 5 years, I know how hard I worked then, and I have no doubt that Kate and Geoff and Alycia have the same kind of work ethics.
Right, I wanted to circle back to like students actually, because I just thought of something that recently that happened where I currently also freelance as a VFX professor on the side, and it's great working with students because you have so much energy and it's awesome, so never lose it. But I had this wonderful student who did this. He made a really good decision this year. He would decide to go back to school for VFX, which was the smartest move I think he made this year. But it's also the reason he made that was because of the current. He got word that the strike might happen this year, so that factored in. But he also gave me permission to kind of share that story. But it was also worrisome as a teacher, kind of encouraging my students to go find a job, knowing that the strike was possibly going to happen this year, because I didn't want to set them up for failure. But it was also one thing I also want students to know, if there's any on this call, like, see this as an increased time to keep perfecting your skill. Like, don't feel bad if you get rejected from studios because of the strike, because it's happening to everyone, senior artists, no matter your level of experience. And just take this time to focus on yourself and focus on being a really good professional human being and leveling up your skills and making connections, because those are going to matter when this is over. And it's never be defeated by rejection right now, because we're here, we've got your back. It's take that time to like educate yourself and keep doing what you do best.
I like that point about being a human being. It's like don't just worry about the art part. Maybe take time out. We had a professor one time that said no homework this weekend, just work on your personalities. And there's something in that, it's like you should work on your whole being, because that plays into every job and every decision you make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like because it's really easy in this industry to become jaded, because so many bad things can happen. Like maybe a project doesn't go the way you want it. Maybe like you thought that shot was going to be the best shot you've ever done, but it was taken away at the last minute and give it to someone else, right? So there's a lot of different examples of like how this industry can like warp your personality to the place it doesn't want to go. So having time like this to just sit down and reflect on those moments in your maybe even personal life as well, not even just in the industry, and just like reassess, how did I react in that situation? Or, maybe next time this happens, I can either apologize for my behavior if I run into that person or persons or people or whatever, or just like, say, okay, that will never happen again, but this is my coping mechanisms in case I get angry or in case something makes me upset. Because it's also easy to get upset right now, being like, if you're unemployed, because like you're watching all the bad news about our industry flood in. So it's easy to get caught up in that wave as well.
I'm curious. We came through the pandemic, and there was a challenge during that as well, right? Where live action stopped shooting because of the health crisis. And then studios ran out of inventory of shots, no plates coming in, that sort of thing. And so I'm curious if people have stories about, side hustles or things other people did to manage that, because it wasn't only this industry at the time. It was, hairdressers and restaurants. And so I'm curious if anyone, even Mihaela, if you wanted to add, or Alycia, anything that you heard of people being resourceful and pivoting during that time to find other things to do and make money.
So I'm going to pivot on what Kate was saying, that I think there's two kind of aspects here where the industry is challenging in and of itself, with all the contracts coming in and then ending, and there's ups and downs. So I think, and the pressures when production is happening. So I think overall, I have seen clients in my practice who come from this industry with high level of anxiety and depression and burnout. And now to have either people who have worked in their careers for a couple of years or are just preparing to enter the career and kind of be faced with this big challenge. I just wanted to emphasize that this is a challenging time, and whatever it is that people are feeling is completely valid. And if in the beginning, any reaction you have to the news coming in is completely understandable. So don't force yourself too much to get on to the other side. That's going to come. So if I can give a nuanced sort of advice of just taking it as it is initially, because you're going to be faced with a mountain of emotions, and some days you're going to feel great and positive, and some days you're gonna feel desperate and hopeless, and that's all understandable, and it all makes sense. So, but yes, of course, the side hustles and the pivots, I've seen a lot of that, and I'm sure all of you can contribute with stories of resilience and success.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, side hustle wise, if anybody's like really in desperate need of looking for stuff, the scientific visualization community is always looking for people, like science centers, planetariums. They're always looking for people to like simulate accurate builds of the sun. And you don't have to be a scientist to understand what they'll give you. They understand that you're an artist, and they'll work with you to make that visualization happen. Teaching is always a good outlet as a side hustle. Mentoring as well, because if you can't get a job as a teacher, usually sometimes they ask for teaching experience or a certain number of experience years in the industry. If you don't have that, you can online mentor. There's Patreon that you can use, and you can, from there, like, there's also YouTube, which unfortunately they've changed their monetization system, but Patreon is also really good if you want to like just freelance teach by yourself as well.
The other thing to add on that, Kate, I remember sitting on a panel on a board with a fellow that ran a medical imaging company, like for all sorts of medical, like dentures even and things like that. And he always needed CG modelers. He needed a rigger, and he said he was really hard pressed to keep them because they would run off to industry all the time. So he said, you know, and I remember being in a studio where we had a modeler join the military because they had a design department that needed CG artists. And we were thinking, but don't you want to build movies? Don't you want to build this cool stuff? And he goes, no, I want to build tanks and other things. We're like, we are building tanks. We're building tanks for the next movie. He goes, no, not that kind of tank. So, you know, there are these skills. And I interviewed a fellow last summer who had come out of a large retailer in the States. He was like Geoff, you know, senior VFX supervisor, and they said they wanted to build a virtual mall experience with all of their product, and they wanted someone to walk through this virtual reality. And he said, well, I'm using all the same skills that I've used before, but a different application. And he was fascinated. He said it was the fantastic project. Now he's looking for another one. So not making movies, cartoons, shows anymore. He's after sort of an e-commerce platform or something that has a large catalog of goods to sell or service. So there, you know, I can think of people that worked in the auto industry, in their design departments. Outside of,
I don't know if they're all side hustles. Alycia was going to say something, so let's let her, and then I've got a couple of the comments.
Yeah, I was just going to circle back on what Mihaela and Kate were saying in regards to working on yourself. I think that obviously everyone can go back to school if that's something that they feel like they need to do or that they want to do in order to improve themselves. I've heard of a lot of people switching over to coding, to learn about coding for software engineer, computer science, because at the end of the day, a lot of these instances or difficult times are out of the control of the VFX industry. So putting that on yourself or trying to feel like, you know, it's my fault that I lost my job, or it's my fault that the studio closed, or it's my fault that I lost this shot. It really doesn't help yourself mentally, because a lot of the times it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with, again, factors that are out of our control. So of course, working on yourself is important. And, you know, I'm not sure what other options people would recommend on this panel on how we could recommend to work on yourself. Like Kate said, going back to school, of course, and then some of the closer side hustles. I think Geoff had mentioned gaming as well. That was a pretty common one that I've heard of in terms of jumping to a different industry.
Learning to like
Except,
know different things.
except now the gamers, the writers or the actors are getting the gamers to the actors to strike on the games as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I want to point out, like, side hustles can take a lot of different turns. Like some of what you're saying is a bit of a could be a 1 or 2 or permanent career switch, which is fine. In that case, it was not a side hustle. Some are just, you need to make money. So to me, a side hustle might be, driving Uber or something like that as well. But I think it's very individual. I think in order to find it, though, you have to say there are the ones that pay, and the ones going to school, you pay or maybe get paid for a little bit at a different rate. But I think I think the one thing is you just got to network a lot, find everything you can to network. Coming to a thing like this, hearing something that Kate said, sparks an idea, but keep doing those kinds of things. Going to events that might have a chance, asking your parents, friends, what they're up to. There's so many ways to find I'll call it side hustles because that's what Lance used, but something to fill the time while you're waiting to get back on the Geoff Scott or whatever track you're looking for.
Yeah.
I'll add to that by sorry.
Go
I'll
ahead.
add to that by saying that it's really important in what you said, that sort of going out and networking, but also because going out and maintaining those social skills is going to be crucial. It's not just losing a job. It's losing it's losing coworkers. It's losing an environment. It's losing support. It's losing.
That's what made COVID double tough, right?
That's it. So going out, networking, continuing to see yourself as a professional, as someone who is in this industry, networking with people from this industry and other industries, just keeping yourself active socially is going to have such positive impact.
Totally agree. I think the panel would agree. There was a VS networking event recently too, and I found even just gathering an old friend or two from a studio and having a coffee and then sharing old stories. And it was like we brought together the distance of many years in a few minutes with a chat. So definitely totally get together. And back to that term side hustle, it's also, as you mentioned, side hustles sometimes do become the full-time thing, right? I can think of one studio years ago, they were dabbling with a YouTube channel and it started to generate revenue, and they thought, oh, look at this was our project. And I think now they've got 5 or 6 YouTube channels, and most of their revenue and their content is broadcast on YouTube now. But many years ago, that was their side hustle, and it turned into basically their main revenue generator for, I think, about 65 or 70 people. So wouldn't discount those sort of things,
Yeah, case in point. Sorry, just to on that, like when I was not an independent VFX supervisor, when I was supervising out of a studio, I started an indie games company just for fun, and it's what I'd work on between midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning, just to do something creative. And within a year, I mean, we weren't generating enough revenue to quit, but we were nominated for Video Game of the Year up against AAA titles. And so that was kind of, there can be things you can do that are at least creatively and creatively satisfying. At least it doesn't necessarily have to make you money, but it keeps your skills honed, as it were.
And that's what I was going to say. Someone mentioned coding, but I think with a lot of the real-time technologies, if you don't know, you can download and see how to do a little bit of programming either in Unity or Unreal for free. So those skills, if you don't have them, might come in handy, or at least the knowledge. So attack an area, you don't have to become an expert, but then you can talk a little understandingly to other people in different departments or doing different things down the road. So use the time to just explore something that's sort of tangential. It might not make money, as Geoff said, or make very little money in his game situation, but he certainly must have learned a ton.
Yeah, I can think of another team that had a demo reel, and they went back and redid it. And it was 2 students that had a pretty good demo reel, I thought, but they plussed it in a downtime and came back, and then they had multiple job offers after that because I guess it was time well spent. The studios responded well. Rather than send the same demo reel, they went back and just gave it a lot of love and fixed up a lot of things, and it was a dramatically better reel when they were finished. And they got together because they realized that individually they didn't have enough time, energy, skill, etc. to do it on their own. So they did it as a project to help them on the other side of a bubble. So
but that was a really good point, because like if you continue, like, don't, just because the strike is happening and you're a student, or a professional, like, don't stop applying to places, like, if you're improving your work, because people need to keep being reminded of who you are and what your skill level is. So even if you're getting rejected, you will still probably get hired somewhere. Like there's one of the most favorite studios of mine that I got to work at in my career. I got rejected by it 4 times before I actually was invited to come join the company. So like, don't get burnt out by just getting rejected by places. So yeah, I just
but you did improve yourself in between, did you not,
yes.
Kate, or do a little bit of different?
Yeah.
That's the other thing reapplying and stuff. But what usually happens with these dips, economic dips, is money sits on the sideline while things and builds up. The audience is always going to want games to be entertained. I mean, that's what I know. The entertainment is a cheap form of leisure and it never goes away. But you have these dips, whether it's a pandemic or a strike or a banking catastrophe or something. But then the money, a shutting of a studio, but money sits at the sidelines, and then when it comes back, it usually comes back, with a little bit of a vengeance. So, and then before leveling off. So I've seen that again and again and again. The general trend has been growth, because that's what's happened in the media and entertainment world, the one where I spend a lot of time. But whenever there's been these pauses, all the studios we work with, some of them cut staff, many of them cut staff or reduce wages or take side hustles themselves, not just individually, but the studios take on, they might go into commercials. I know one European studio is going into commercials and doing very, very well, and they never did commercials before, but commercials haven't died out, so they're doing local commercials and in computers. So they're doing the same thing while they are waiting to take on more work, and that work will come. That's we're in a difficult time now, but having seen this before, it will come back. So you got a stutter step, but do something with that stutter step, I guess, is the thing I'm hearing, all these different ideas.
Yep. Anybody else want to add anything on that point?
Yeah, just a small one. Like sometimes, when these downtimes sometimes they're global, right? But sometimes they're local. Like right now, we're really localized to North America. I know I saw a listing for 17 compositors in London. So if you can go to England, and you're a compositor and you want to, and it's about being nomadic. Like, I remember very specifically when we'd had sort of a quick succession back in the early 2000s. We'd had the bubble burst. We had 9/11 and American studios didn't want to work with Canadians. And then Toronto got hit with SARS. And again, it was we all felt that it was going to come crashing down, but there was always work. I flew out to BC, supervised a show, brought it back. One of the worst movies of all time, but that's fine, right? You do what you do what you need to do. So sometimes you might need to be a bit nomadic if you can afford to be nomadic.
Well, in some of these smaller studios, medium size, they'll let you work remotely. I mean, you have to be in the time zone maybe or something like that. But I'd say you're right. If the big studios are getting hit globally, because they're really relying on shopping that Hollywood footage all around the world. But then there's tons and tons of studios that have nothing to do with Hollywood, footage. It's all commercial work, small local animation work, local games work, that kind of thing. So you might want to look to work remotely, or people might want to look to work remotely, or even move if that's available to them for some of these mid-sized studios.
Yeah, I think that's again one of the silver linings of the the health crisis we just came through a few years ago, a lot of studios pivoted, everyone was working remote, and now there's more of an openness. Historically, the projects were no, we can't, they all have to be locked down for security reasons, we can't leave, and so on and so on. So we're in a different era where this is now an option, which I think is helpful at a time like this where things are slow. People are able to potentially pick up work on the other side of the world. And that might be exactly one of the strategies of getting through this, is pick up a remote contract anywhere. And I've met in our practice, we've met many people overseas working for US studios or Canadian studios. I can think of people all over Eastern and Western Europe that have a gig working on a contract for a studio over here. I think it could work in the other direction as well. So something to think about. Apply everywhere, I guess, would be the advice. You never know where that contract might come up and where the shortage is. There might be a shortage of people on the other side of the planet in another country, and boom. And I always think of the people you're going to meet. All the other connections you're going to make on that, and those folks might help you with the next job, or you might help them. So, okay. I'm thinking from wellness, mental health perspective. What are some of the things people can look into if they're struggling with, let's say, anxiety or depression or something like that? Haley, do you want to maybe jump in on, what could we do to help each other or colleagues, or if an individual is aware of their going through their own issues, what would be some of the things that you might sort of advise?
For sure. I just want to go back on the first point, and I think it's human nature to want to quickly jump into action. I think this is probably one of the ways in which we cope. We quickly jump into action. We think about a solution. We think about an action plan, and all of that is amazing. But I think in the process of doing so, we might actually shortchange ourselves, because we might not be fully aware or fully in touch with what is happening with our mental health or wellness. So going back to the idea that in times of difficulty, the best thing you can do for yourself is self-compassion. And it's a bit of an overused term, but nonetheless, it's one that carries a lot of weight. We cope by jumping into action, but we actually make it onto the other side by going through. The old saying of the way out is through. Just being with that experience of how all of this impacts you emotionally and mentally, and understanding that there's no prescribed way of coming out of this, that each individual has their own way of approaching it, but really recognizing the impact and staying with it and acknowledging it, being aware, talking about it with colleagues, peers, supports, just really doing an inventory of all the support you have, be it in the industry, be it in your families, in friends, support systems of all kinds. I know resources. I know Alycia put together a list of all the resources that are available. There are a lot of resources available. Fortunately, the pandemic has really taught us to stretch ourselves in ways that we never thought possible before. For example, therapy now is done online. It was never a thing that was ever done online, and there were maybe some outliers, but it was never conceived of being provided online. And now it's everywhere, and in more than in one way. It can be done through like short-term support, like EAPs. Some of you will have access to that short-term support, or longer-term support if your insurance covers, or a partner's insurance might cover as well. Some longer-term therapy. Therapy can be accessed through mental health institutions, through family doctor, and so on. But really just talking about it and not sort of closing in of this experience, thinking that it's something individual, when everyone who's here on this panel has witnessed that it is a very common experience, that everyone is going through this. So taking this as a way to feel supported and open about that experience.
And Alycia, did you want to add anything on that while we're
Yeah, I
point?
just wanted to add a couple of things, not directly related necessarily to therapy, but I think just also really leaning on your peers, your friends, your coworkers, your family is I've seen very beneficial. And I think also, reaching out to coworkers or friends that you feel may be struggling. For example, I've had people approach me, letting me know that, hey, like I really think this person is struggling. And for me as an HR person, it gives me the ability to send them resources, make sure that they have what they need in order to manage their coping strategies. And also just helping them feel heard and seen. I feel like for a lot of people that really makes a difference, is just having that solid support system around you. And, in this industry, when something happens, it affects everybody. It's typically not just one department or a couple of people, it's industry wide. And, I think that that's really something that makes the VFX industry so strong, but also supportive internally. I can say, from my experience in other industries as well, the VFX people are a lot more close, I guess it would be a good word. Everyone really has each other's backs and is supportive. And I think that just making sure that we continue with that through all of this is really, I think, how a lot of people are going to be able to get through it.
Great. We got two quick anecdotes I want to add. There was an animation studio we were working with who the management team occasionally would find something like that. They think somebody's really struggling, and the one of the owners had a barbecue in his trunk, a portable barbecue, and they would basically drive up, knock on the door and go, "We're having lunch outside your house." And they would throw a sort of surprise barbecue. But it was this random act of, kindness or whatever you want to call it. But they said, like, it was the no Marines left behind kind of attitude. They were like, let's go punk that guy. Let's go have a barbecue, like surprise him. And I thought that was kind of a unique, fun method of, approaching the employees and saying, we recognize you. The other one I found a little bit much more serious, I think, where one of the members of this team was really suffering and was on medication for depression. And one of the team members would call him every morning to make sure he had his medication. Like without fail. Have you had your pills yet? How are you doing? They checked in regularly. And I think it carried him through a fairly dark time. So I thought that was a really cool thing to observe, just people going, this is what we're going to do. So I thought that was a nice support system of just peers helping other people out. I just want to add back to if anyone watching, if you have questions, by all means, drop them in the Q&A box. We've had a couple come through. So if you have any questions, please, by all means, drop them in there. We're kind of ahead of time, which is great, I suppose. We're cooking along through the questions that I've got written down here.
I've got to follow up a bit to the not as fun a barbecue anecdote to go. That was I like that one, but I just want to remind, and I got thinking maybe someone knows the answer to this, but at any given time in our company, good times and bad, there's always at least one. We have about 150 people. There's always one person who's struggling. It's just kind of like the odds. Now there's a lot more people struggling in certain times in certain areas. Is it easier to is it harder to struggle alone or to struggle with a bunch of people? I shouldn't be laughing, but it's kind of a serious question. Like, is there misery loves company?
I can probably answer that because I was just going to follow up like Lance's points because actually this has been happening to me actually during everything that's going on. So about a month, without going into too much detail, about a month before I found out I was temporarily not going to have work, I got into a breakup and it was horrendous for me. I just went through all the grief that you can imagine. But I was working and I was like, okay, I have nothing left, and I'm just like powering through what I have left. And I was like, I have to keep working, I have to keep working. And there's a strike just hanging over my head. And then strike happened. Well, and I was out of work, but I would have made it through the first month of really being laid off if it hadn't been for my friends in the industry, especially for specific friends in the industry. And they just always reminded me that it was going to be okay. And they just were there for me. They made sure I was at social events, that I was safe. If I had panic attacks, they were right beside me and they would be like, let's go home, but let's go watch a movie. And they never gave up on me, and they still don't. And they're some of the best people I think I've ever been friends with. So I have to say, I'm so happy I'm laid off because it's letting me go through this very emotional period of my life where I can grieve properly. There's nothing forcing me not to think about it, or anything that's forcing it to explode out of me and, have a negative reaction in a moment where I shouldn't. So it's good to let go and have periods of this where you can just sit at home, maybe just watch the Barbie movie and just let go. So I really encourage that for a lot of people. Yeah.
Would it be a fair comment too? I mean, if you can afford to take some time off, it is the tail end of the summer, but I've seen some people occasionally with a severance, and rather than, some people rush right back to work immediately. Other ones think, oh, I've got a bit of money here in the bank, and maybe I'm just going to smell the roses for a minute. Maybe I'm just going to even take a mini trip and go to, like, let's say Sandbanks, somewhere not too far, but a beach, and take a break and sort of look after themselves, enjoy the, because I find in this industry sometimes we get excited, get deep into projects, and then I think Geoff and Kate, you've probably seen where a movie's starting or just as another one's finishing, and then there's two other ones in partial completion, and you end up working on all four at the same time. Is that correct or not?
Oh God, yeah. Sorry, there was one year a few years ago I supervised 13 projects in that year. It was same year I won for best video game as well. Was nominated for like 4 CSAs or 3 CSAs. Like it's you can burn yourself out. Like I took this summer off. I worked up until June. I knew the strike was coming, and I couldn't work on another project. I needed to take the summer for, and then I was instantly sick for almost like 3 weeks, right, because like physically just couldn't get out of bed. Was doing COVID tests every day. I thought, oh, what, third time now? It wasn't. It was just the physical effects of burnout. And I mean, there was a project that had sort of come across my doorstep a little bit, and I had nothing left to give that project. Like I was like, oh my God, that'd be amazing. And then I flatlined on what I could do for it. I just had nothing to offer. So I was like, I didn't even go for it. Didn't respond to emails and anything. So take the time if you can afford to. Take the time.
I was going to say, I think we could probably have a separate discussion about that one specific topic, about how to manage, so many projects coming at the same time and so on. When it's a feast or famine, sometimes, right? It's a little bit out of control at times. So, and I know every studio has different resources. Some are have better equipment than others and that sort of thing. But I'm curious, Alycia, from a perspective of things like employee assistance programs and things like that. I know some have and some don't on benefits programs, and I'm sure Mihaela is very familiar with some of these things too. And I just want to touch briefly on, if a studio has an employee assistance program, what would those look like? Because I know all of them don't. I've worked in various studios where they do or they don't. They're sometimes seen as very expensive too to manage. So there are pros and cons, I'm sure. But anyways, if I could turn it over to Alycia and Mihaela just to sort of maybe highlight what some of those EAP programs may involve, and potentially different levels, because some are very basic and some might be more robust.
Yeah, so I can just kind of speak to my personal experience. I guess for mental health overall, What I really try to do as an HR manager is making sure that, of course, our employees are supported. In this industry, I've especially seen burnout, mental health struggles. So it's definitely something that's very important to me when I'm in a studio. So for, things that I have done is making sure that our benefits plan is adequate, that it covers psychotherapy, psychiatry, and social workers as well. And there's always room for improvement, like you said, Lance. It really depends on what the studio is able to budget, how long the studio has been alive. That has a lot to do with it, the current circumstances of the industry as well. And EAP is definitely a great option. I have experience working with it and having it as part of one of the studios that I've worked at. It's an employee assistance program, and it does have it's a great gateway into understanding what it is that you need. So, again, it depends on the plan, but you're able to dip your feet into counseling, into, if you're wanting to, get physically fit as well, there's actually like lifestyle coaches. And again, it's not something that you would necessarily rely on, but it is a great gateway into understanding what it is that you need to help cope. Because I feel like a lot of times people know that they're struggling, but they're not necessarily sure what they're struggling on or with. So an EAP program is really a great, it's in the name, assistance. It assists you with understanding what it is that you need help with. And that way you can direct yourself into therapy, maybe getting an actual lifestyle coach. I've seen like money management coaches as well, because maybe you're struggling with your finances, and really just directing you where you need the most help. Mihaela, I'm sure that you have more to add to that, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I support everything you're saying. EAP is a great resource. It's a gateway, and it's a sort of like a crisis, kind of immediate type of response. Usually services are provided within a week, so it's not something you need to get on a wait list for. And some, depending on the company, some EAPs provide a couple of sessions that are really helpful in giving a lot of clarity. Some might be a bit longer. And I think just having that point of access and really taking advantage of the benefits that are offered is a good resource.
Great.
Can I tie a couple things together? We're VES, we're Toronto, and so we're very Toronto centric, and this will be recorded and watched hopefully worldwide. And sandbags might not be so close, but I'd be amiss to say to the VES members that there is something called the Member Assistance Program available on the website, the VES website, which also lists, and it's for all over the world. There's links, so it provides a number of benefits that you should check out. We call it MAP, so that's been available to all of VES members.
Yep,
if you're logged in.
Yep. Mihaela, I got a question about I think how do you recognize yourself when you're overtired or exhausted, or Geoff mentioned earlier too, there's just nothing left in the tank, so to speak, right? And I can remember a million years ago talking to someone, and they said, if you could rank your stress level on a scale of 10 right now, what's it look like? And I'm thinking, 6 or 7. And then you explain everything you're juggling, and they go, no, that's about a 12 out of 10, buddy. What are you doing? But until you bounce it off someone else to reflect. So anyways, I turn it over. Do you have some thoughts on that of how does someone self-diagnose, or how do they, not to diagnose, but get a read or a temperature on their own sort of stress level?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a difference between stress and burnout. Regular stress is just something we all human beings have the capacity of handling. When stress piles up and it's not handled immediately, and it just accumulates, then it can spill into something that's a bit more serious. So for my how I look at it is, if it's something that's limited to one area of your life, it's probably something that's stressful. You probably have a lot more resources to deal with it. But when it starts spilling in all areas of life, where now your relationships are impacted, you're isolating from your peers, from your friends, your mood is consistently either spiraling out of control with anxiety or low, weeks and weeks don't make a difference in how your mood stays, then I would say that you're probably looking at something more serious. So of course, the first I would recommend anyone speak to their family doctor if there's one in the picture. They have great tools to diagnose and just self-assessment inventories of symptoms that would tell someone that they might be approaching that kind of clinical level of anxiety or depression. They can be easily found online as well, anxiety inventories, depression inventories, where things don't change. So you wake up and you're not rested, and that kind of lasts day after day and week after week and month after month. So then you know you're dealing with something more serious than just accumulated stress. And of course, it's important to remember that every individual is unique and comes to these challenges and these difficulties with their own history. Some people, Kim was making this remark earlier on, that some people seem to struggle a little bit more than others. And why is that? Well, because everyone has a level of trauma. And whenever something challenging happens, it can be just that drop that just makes the bucket spill. Kate was talking about her personal experience where she was going through a breakup. And now you have this doom and gloom in her career as well. So when things start piling up, that's when usually their lives start crumbling, and their emotions and mental health also go to the sidelines.
Yep. I also want to add, you said family doctors. So at least from what I know in Ontario, because I have one and I use all the mental health services I can through it right now, which has been a blast. I find that they will accept people who don't have insurance sometimes. So definitely ask your doctor about that. So if you don't have insurance, they should be the first people you ask if you really want to see a therapist. So yeah, they're really beneficial in that regard. But also, like, if you have access to your benefits during this, go get your back fixed. We all have back pain and it just makes our lives miserable. So also work on that. Maybe pick up I also find exercise is really helpful. I've started going on 2-hour bike rides every single day, and that's been really fun. I live somewhere in a conservation area right now. And so my goal is there's this massive bike trail that goes all the way up to Paris. So I'm going to hopefully do that soon. And that's my goal through this pandemic. So even exercise goals can help you get motivated and get off your feet and stop living in your room. So definitely consider that as well. Yeah. Great.
I wanted to jump into things like employment insurance and turn this over. Alycia, I'm sure you would probably be more knowledgeable on this than the rest of us. So I'm just curious, what can we talk about as far as, applying for employment insurance, and some of the regs around that might be helpful for some folks?
Yeah, for sure. I just actually wanted to touch quickly on something that Kate said regarding benefits. I would also look into your benefits package. If you are laid off or if you were terminated, you may still be eligible to have your benefits for up to 3 months after being terminated. So just keep that in mind. Look at your package, see if it's something that they offer, because again, you may be eligible to continue using them even after your termination date. Now jumping into EI, we'll be sending a resources sheet out after we finish this panel, and it will provide all of the links that I'm going to be discussing, And again, I know that this was mentioned briefly beforehand, but this is specific to Ontario and Canada. So just keep that in mind. EI kind of changes depending on where you are, and also where you're working. So if you're a contractor, you most likely aren't eligible for unemployment insurance. But again, just look at your personal laws, depending on where you're located. For here in Ontario, you are generally eligible to collect up to 55% of your regular earnings. But the final amount is determined by the Government of Canada. So that's why I say up to, because again, it varies. It depends on things such as insurable hours, if you're part-time or full-time. The list goes on. Again, I will be sending out the resource sheet so you can look at these links directly, and you'll know kind of a rough idea of what you'll be eligible for. It can also take up to 2 to 4 weeks before you receive any amount of payment. So just keeping that in mind when you're looking at your budgeting, your finances. If you are laid off, I would apply for EI immediately. You do need an ROE, which is a record of employment, but your company should be submitting that on your next pay period, essentially. And you don't need to wait for it in order to apply for EI. You can apply for EI immediately. If you, for whatever reason, don't receive your ROE within your following pay period or when you're expecting your last paycheck, reach out to your HR department and make sure that they give it to you. They will sometimes submit it automatically to your Service Canada account, so just keep an eye on that. But you can also ask for a copy yourself so that you have it via email or mail. Even if you are a freelance worker or a part-time employer or employee, you may still be eligible for partial EI. So again, we'll include that link that you can have a look at and just see what you can be eligible for. And that's for people who say they're a professor in their spare time when they're not working as a VFX artist. If you were laid off your VFX job, maybe you're still doing your part-time professor job, you can still collect EI in certain circumstances. Again, it would really depend on how much time you're working and what your hours are like. If you do have any questions about what you're entitled to, if you are terminated, again, we will include the link in the government resources. And this will be things such as severance. And finally, just regarding the government website that we'll be including the links to, this is again pertaining to Ontario and Canada. So just keep that in mind when you do look at these links, if you look at them. Some of them may not be applicable to where you're located. So just look at your local resources.
Right. The legislation is different province by province, probably state by state. So yeah, okay. And Kim mentioned earlier too, he touched on the VES has the member assistance program. Did you want to touch on that a little bit and highlight some of the things that are in that program for VES members?
Yeah, I wish I could do a better job of it because it's a lot of people don't know about it, including me, but I know that if you go there, it's for every country. It's LifeWorks and it's TELUS is the provider of it, and there's things like grievances, and if you're grieving, if you need mental health, but the thing is, it goes well beyond Ontario. It's every country pretty much, and every language is in there. So there's a lot of different. Most of them are health and wellness kind of links. So you can work in your own language. So I think that's a good thing. I think what Alycia's got are going to be good for the bulk are going to be overlap in many cases what we're saying today. with the member assistance program, but it might still be interesting for some of our members in Ontario to take a quick look at the MAP programs and what's available. The nice thing about it's sort of like insurance. You shouldn't hope you don't need it. It's there for everyone, and but when you need it, you need it, and that's something the VES has put in place for everyone and all their members.
Great. And just a clarification, when we said EI, employment insurance, is just a double check. We didn't drop an acronym without filling it in. There's a few questions from the audience. But before I jump into that, I just wanted to make sure, Alycia, Mahalia, were there any other points you wanted to address as far as mental health and tactics and resources? I know we're going to send out a couple pages that you've prepared with links, so people will have those later to do whatever they would access any numbers of health things. But just want to make sure before I move to questions, was there anything else that you wanted to add? Are we good for now?
Not from me.
Okay.
Like you mentioned, everything that I really wanted to point out is in the resources sheet that we'll be sending out.
Okay, great. Mahalia, anything else from your
I
side?
did want to say that I think it's really important to prioritize mental health. It might not feel like this should be where you put your time and energy, given that I'm sure everyone is looking to make it work somehow, get onto the next gig or pivot. But that can be actually quite stressful as well. So as much as it feels counterintuitive, slow down, rest a bit if you can, and prioritize mental health in whatever way possible. Leaning into your supports, leaning into resources that are available online and through your insurance, and really respecting yourself and your own pace, because it will come. Things will change. You will get onto the next, or you will get onto the other side. But self-compassion and awareness will go a long way.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. So I wanted to jump onto some questions here. One of them is, I'm in the game industry. Our entire studio shuttered last month. I have severance, feel pressure to find a new role fast because my position is so in demand. I've had studios reaching out. I've got offers on the table. Want to make sure I'm taking time to make the right call. It's hard to figure out whether I should jump on these first couple of opportunities or wait for the right position elsewhere. Anybody want to give some advice on that?
I can kind of start. I'm not a supervisor myself, but recently I kind of mentioned like I was grieving at the start of this strike. And during that period, I got an offer to work at a really cool and interesting studio. And it was a really tempting offer because I know I could have gone really far in it. I could see myself really enjoying it. And it was somewhere where a lot of my friends are. So I was like, oh, this is like everywhere I want to end up. This is where I want to be. But I knew mentally I did not have the energy for it. And so I knew even if I said yes, even if I was in that position, I would have nothing to give. I just would have no creativity, and I had to make the call to say no. And I had to tell my friends, I'm not going to work with you. I'm really sorry. And I think that was the right call looking back on that. Yeah.
Great. Anybody else? Any opinions on that? Jump.
Yeah. I mean, I'll add to it just basically. I mean, that's really, it's a personal call, Ryan. If you can afford to take the time and wait, knowing that opportunities could dry up, then take it. If you need to, exact same as Kate. Like I was at a point where there was a project that was potentially like, we would like, next level, like, and I had nothing to give. So that's really, you have to decide that for yourself. It's a tough one because,
it's a great question, but only the individual knows. But the one thing to think of: do you need to jump back in? Because ultimately, it sounds like there will be work.
tough. The other thing, a little nuance to that. Sometimes we have coached candidates to say, "Look, do you need me right away? Can you wait a week? I really need an extra week off." And if they're keen to put an offer on the table, it's worth a discussion. And you could say, "Look, it's not a deal breaker, but I'm just curious. I just came off a big project. I need a break. I'd rather start fresh. Are you cool with us pushing the start date out another 10 days or something?" And test them. If you have that opportunity and option, I don't think it's a bad question. And I've had, I'm sure some of the others on the call have many times where I can remember an artist starting too early, and this individual had taken the offer, said, "I'll be there next week." And a producer on the show she was on called me directly and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean? What am I doing?" "Well, I need her for like 3 more weeks." I said, "Well, we don't really need her right away. She told us she could start next week." He said, No, I really need her." I said, "Well, keep her for like, you know what I mean? You can negotiate. And I think that's sometimes it's not always there, but it doesn't hurt for the phone call to try, right? And again, in this whole topic of looking after yourself, we used to joke years ago when I was in the video game industry, "Oh, I've got to take a week off just to catch up on my laundry and all the games I haven't played that were released while we were busy producing a game." And many times we've seen at the end of a movie all the babies born during the making of the movie. Like some of these projects, as you know, take quite a considerable amount of time, and life happens. So anyways, to that question, I think as people have alluded to and Geoff said, it's a personal decision. And if you have the resources to wait it out, it doesn't feel like the right job, other people would say, take it, right? It's money right now and you might need to survive. And so there's probably at least 2 or 3 schools of thought on how to answer that question. And ultimately, it's up to the individual to figure out what's going to work there. Going back to some questions. One of the people watching said, "Is it a good idea during this time to learn the pathway and switch into more generalist role, since it seems like the only role which studios still hire in uncertain times? Or just stay in our previous role even though no one is hiring currently for it?" So do you specialize, or do you broaden and maybe become a jack of several trades? What does the panel want to comment on that?
I've done very well as a generalist. That led me directly into supervising. That's me, though. I didn't want to be a lighter. I didn't want to exclusively be an animator. I didn't want to be a compositor exclusively. I can do all of these things very badly, but I also can help with clients knowing all that. So that's really kind of, again, it's an individual decision. Where do you want to go with your career?
Right. Anyone else? Lawrence, you want to jump in on that one?
I think, yeah, I've hired a lot, and I've been a generalist in my time. And, I think a great thing is to diversify your skill set. It doesn't necessarily mean being a generalist. A lot of people who become generalists tend to fall into it. But I think that for me, the big takeaway is if you're interested in another role, now is actually a really good time to explore it, and that opens your job and your hiring opportunities.
And when you say like a good CG soup or a good VFX soup probably needs a general skill set, or some portion of his or her career needs that kind of multidisciplinary, understanding all parts of the pipe, rather than just being, I am the lighting and rendering person, or I am the, but again, obviously certain people want to make their career in a certain space. And we've seen CG soups or VFX soups that start at one end of the pipe and slowly migrate through the pipe, in their journey of learning more about it. So I'm just curious, any thoughts on that? Generalist, where does it lead? Maybe there's a path that isn't, I'm just going to be the senior lighter, the lighting soup, the lighting king of lighting, Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it again, generalist literally led me to being a VFX supervisor. That was the end goal. I liked it all. I'll be honest, I hated effects. I couldn't. Houdini, beyond me. Prisms was even worse. But that was because I'm old and I just wanted to see the pictures now. So But again, I worked in exclusively in prison's Houdini environment for like a year and a half. So, you know, it, and again, I'm always learning, I'm always reading, and I'm always looking at new techniques. And, you know, I've been spending a lot of time in the last little while playing around with AI tools, you know, just to, you know, because these are going to be new things that we have to use. So,
Yep. Great. Another question that came in, someone said, my struggle. I've been a senior supervisor in a niche area in VFX for a long time at a studio. Now I'm out of work. I feel I am behind if I try to compare with other artists and job titles. A ton of quotes, imposter syndrome. How would you recommend handling that mental block? I feel I match 80% of a job post, but always a tremendous doubt on points I have not had experience with, and I panic to even apply to those roles.
I'm actually going to jump in here. I have seen a ton of imposter syndrome in this industry, probably overall in most industries, I'd say. And my recommendation is always apply for the job. Whether you think that you match 100%, 150%, or only like 20% of the job posting, I would say apply. The worst thing that is going to happen is they won't respond to you or they'll send you a rejection. And in my opinion, it is worth the risk. And in regards to imposter syndrome, I would say honestly that the best thing to do is fake it till you make it. If you feel like you don't necessarily have all the skill sets, most of the time when you're getting into a new job or a new position, you feel that way. You feel like you aren't, 100% applicable. And that's what makes you. It's good to stress about certain things because it provides an opportunity to grow and to learn. And I would say most of the time you're probably wrong about not feeling like you have the skill set that is needed to do the job. And even if you don't, there's nothing wrong with learning on the job. All of us are doing it all the time. People who have 10 years of experience in the job, they're still learning. 50 years of experience on the job, still learning. I don't think that I've ever met someone who isn't still learning on the job.
I did say take a two-fork thing too, because you'll never have 100%. Just keep going, as Alycia said. But on the other hand, if you do feel that you want to brush up, this is the great time to, while you're applying, is to brush up in that area. Maybe you have fallen a little behind because of the box they put you in, or you put yourself in at somewhere. So this is a good time to do both, I think. Keep on applying, but keep on expanding and using this time to learn some new things about your specialty.
Yeah, good, very good. Very good advice. I've seen also people doubling down on like Unreal Engine and taking the time to, download tutorials and read up on it and figure it out. And the other one I remember years ago on a movie where we were using end cloth, and no one in the studio wanted to admit that they actually knew how to use it because it was a tool that no one wanted to use. But the soup on the movie, it said we're using end cloth, and it was like mice scurrying from the room. Nope, don't know, never seen it. People panicking. And there was this one fella, he was a fairly recent graduate, and I remember English was not his first language, so he was struggling, but he realized there was a vacuum here, and he went home and started teaching himself end cloth at night. And within a few months on that movie, he was the end cloth specialist, right? So the soup loved him. He was like, this guy's killing it over here. So everyone had to then listen to him, and he was instructing people. He became the lead on the movie. And after that movie, he was then a cloth specialist at another studio. So, it's just sort of fun to see that he doubled down on the vacuum or the weakness and made a meal out of it. So potentially an opportunity sometimes to learn something. And Lawrence, jump in on that if you want to.
And I just want to call it something on imposter syndrome. I think anybody and everybody is probably going to run into it at some point in your life. And it's a good thing. It tells you that you are in a situation where you're being challenged and you're surrounded by people who are talented and you can learn from them. So I think it's a good thing to embrace. And like, if you're feeling it, acknowledge it and understand that probably a bunch of other people around you also feel it as well. So
I want to jump in on
honestly,
that
I've been
too
doing
for
this for
learning
25 years and I'm a
resources.
fraud. Sorry, sorry, Kate.
Oh no, sorry. So learning resource wise, I think it's also really important if like there's always something called the VES handbook. Now it is 2,000 pages long, but it is great. I actually, if you don't have a copy and you live in Toronto, I totally recommend going to TIFF. They have a copy. And you can just read up on every single stage on set or in studio wise with VES. And honestly, it's a go-to book. You'll learn so much. So if you don't like sitting around and watching a 3-hour tutorial on YouTube, you like reading, that's the book to go to. But if you also want to learn about like the history of this industry, and how all the techniques have fed into each other, and just how, we came from optical effects and how that led into ideas for compositing software, I'd recommend checking out TIFF reference library if you're in Toronto. It's free for anyone. Anyone can walk in and request material, and they have thousands of books on visual effects. And so if you really want to understand the underlying workings of everything and feel like an expert, go there. It's awesome.
Great. Perfect. Thanks, Kate. A couple more questions here. Is it better to ride the feast and famine wave and work hard and rest hard? Or would you recommend only taking on what you can comfortably handle and hope when you're ready for new work, there is work for you?
I think this is probably something that's relatively prevalent in the VFX industry. Because like we had mentioned earlier, there seems to be waves where, work is plentiful and then it's dried up. And I think that it really depends on what your situation is. Some people can't afford to hope and wait, whereas other people are able to. For me personally, I would always recommend only taking on what you can handle mentally and physically. However, of course, there's circumstances where perhaps that's not an option. And in those circumstances, I would just say continue to try to improve yourself so that you can increase your rate and eventually get to a position where you're able to take on just the work that you feel comfortable with. And I think that's really the best route to take, in my opinion, and from my experience.
Great.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. Like with the sort of working from home, I was as an independent supervisor, I was able to take on and manage 2 projects. I would be shooting one and then doing post on another. But over 3 years of that, it led to a point of critical burnout. So if you can manage it, but and I thought, well, I'll take the summer off. Well, I spent a large part of the summer, incapable of doing anything because I was physically ill, and then I spent the rest of it thinking, I was gonna do all this creative stuff, and I've only just started, and that was a month and a half to an additional 2 months. So if you work yourself to a point where you're burnt out, this whole I bought all this time, you don't necessarily get it in the end, So I would, as Alycia said, take the work that you can do physically and mentally, and save knowing that there's going to be times like these. Yeah, it's what happens. That there are leaner times.
Yeah, I always like the I've booked a vacation and the flights are paid for already. It's hard to kind of go, oh no, but we need, sorry, it's like 6 months ago I bought the tickets, and sometimes I found that when we're hiring someone, they say, oh, just so you know, I'll start, but this is non-negotiable. I have this event where we're flying away for, so I don't know, again, I think we talked about it at the top of the hour about, we could probably do a conversation just about that, setting boundaries at work, and, being able to talk to your employer and negotiate, hey, this can't, I need these weeks off, this is happening, Okay, just a couple more questions. In times like this, the artists might tend to underestimate their value and push their rates lower to grab a job. I myself would encourage all of us to keep our rates as it was because it might affect everyone. I'm wondering what your opinion is on that. So should you drop your average rate right now to get a project, or hold to your guns and say, no, no, this is what I was making before this time?
Well,
Thoughts,
what do you think
opinions?
what do you think the studios are doing?
Yeah. Well,
They're dropping their bids in order to stay alive. So
right.
it's a tough time for everyone. I'm not the studio owners, but I know that you have to make your own decision at that. I'm just going to say it might be very hard, but holding your rate's not a bad thing, because you can take the time off, and there always is a place that where you can hold the rates. If your studio you're at won't do it, maybe there's a studio that will, and maybe not bidding on film work at the moment, maybe, but have enough other stuff that you can hold your rate. So I would tend to, that's again an individual decision, because you might like the culture where you are. You might want to work with the studio and they have an open policy and they're telling you why they're dropping their rates. But they're in tough times too.
Right.
I also just want to point out that sometimes people need to lower their rates because maybe they aren't able to find a job, unfortunately, in these circumstances or COVID circumstances, but they need to still put food on the table for their family, so they have to drop their rates. And I wouldn't necessarily say that impacts their value as an artist or as a member of the team. I think that it really depends on that individual circumstances, the market as well, because that changes and evolves depending on production, on Hollywood, on everything, like on the health crisis of 2020 as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say that if they're lowering their rates and they're underestimating their value. I think it depends on their individual circumstances and what they're able to afford financially. Yeah.
Great. One last question. Every job has a different workflow, so every job has new challenges. However, I find I am not getting jobs because they see I am overqualified, and they might not have the budget, so they don't even offer the role to me. Any suggestions on how to express that I'm open to lesser jobs or lesser paying jobs without undermining my career? This would have to be communicated via email or online application form. Thanks. So questions, opinions on that?
Well, from an HR perspective, I know people aren't really doing them as often, but cover letters, or if you're sending your application via an email, adding to your email things such as, I'm looking to break into this industry. I know I have a ton of experience in this other industry, but I understand that, I'm new and I'm willing to learn. And that's not necessarily saying that you're willing to take a pay cut, but it's acknowledging the fact that you have this experience and you're looking to make a change.
Yeah, I can add to that. When I switched from film to games, I literally took a pay cut by half. Now that was so I could learn something new, a completely new industry. And I explained to the owners that I was fine for that, and they were a little surprised because I ended up being one of the highest paid people in the company. So sometimes different studios, different industries, they pay less for the same skill set. You just, if you can get a foot in the door, if you and speak to somebody, it's easy to communicate, and it doesn't undervalue you, and it won't wreck your career. It's just, it's sometimes you have to do it. And again, it depends if you're, if you need to pay a mortgage, you need to feed people.
Well, I think the anonymous questioner was saying that they're even willing to take less, but people just say, oh, he's too senior, or overqualified. He didn't use the word senior, but I've seen this happen where it's like sometimes the senior or the overqualified is also not a good fit. Even if you're willing to take a less, sometimes it's just like the dynamics will be wrong or the skill set is wrong. So seeing yourself as overqualified is obviously a self-assessment. Maybe talk to some other people about why you wouldn't be getting the jobs and see if you can get an introduction, or maybe they'll see you differently and be able to say, hey, you're not, it's not about qualifications, it's the wrong job. So I'm thinking, like a lot of questions we get, it's very hard when you're not in there. We can only answer in a general way, but I think that even with a lesser salary, they may want some special skill that's not in there, and you think you're overqualified and they don't see it that way. So cover letter's great. Discussion's even better, either with the people. If you can get in there, you can find that fit. That's what you want to do. You want to find the fit, and if not that job, some other job that might be around the corner.
Yeah, great. Lawrence, Alycia, do you want to add anything about the resource pages? Where do we find them? Where are they going out, and so on?
I'm going to share my screen real quick and just
Okay,
go
cool.
through some of the VS resources. I didn't introduce myself. My name's Lawrence. I'm a member of the board of managers in the VS Toronto chapter. I'm one of the people who helped organize this event. So hopefully everybody can see VS website.
Yep,
so I just wanted to highlight some resources. Thank you. If you go to vsglobal.org, there's this resources section, and this is a lot of this is open to the public. You don't have to be a VS member. This job page, this job board page here is excellent. Not only does it list several great job resources, it also has some really good tips that are pulled from the VS membership, people with a lot of experience about how to apply for a job. So this is definitely a good one to check out. There's also a health and well-being resources, and this is great. It talks about the member assistance program, which Kim talked about, and I'll get into a bit more detail in a second. It covers that there's some cool health apps that VS members have access to. And it highlights a webinar series, which I'll also explain in a second, which was excellent. But I want to really highlight, even though in this talk we focused on Ontario and Toronto, if you go to this VS page, there are health resources for many different locales. And these are open to the public. And for example, if you click on Australia, it will take you to a page with phone numbers you can call for help for that region. So if you are struggling and you're looking for help, this is a really great place to start. If you are a VES member, as Kim mentioned, you have the MAP program, Member Assistance Program. And this is, it's an excellent program that is similar to EAP that you might have from an employer, where you can get help with any challenges in life. And I'll particularly call out that this does cover for free multiple visits with a licensed therapist. So if you are struggling and you are looking to get some help, this is kind of an easy route into getting that help. So definitely check that out if you're a member of the VES. The last thing I'll highlight is this is open to everybody. There's this series called Reignite Yourself that covers general mental health in the VFX industry and has input from doctors, trained professionals, and also some industry veterans who have had a lot of experience. It covers stress, staying calm in high pressure situations, boundaries and preventing burnout, dealing with feedback and building confidence. So this is an excellent video series. It was done in part between the VES and the government of Quebec and several sponsors, which you'll see if you go into that. I kind of recommend this for everybody. So that's the VES side. I'll flip over to Alycia to cover some other useful resources.
Yeah, so like I mentioned previously, we will be sending out a resource sheet that'll be shared over social media. So LinkedIn, for example. I'm not sure if VES is going to be sharing it on their personal platforms. But I know that I'll be sharing it on my LinkedIn. I'm sure Lawrence will be sharing it on his and Lance on his as well. So you can take a look at that if you do need it. In regards to resources, if you're in need of them immediately, I always recommend looking at your personal city or country. They'll often have resources readily available for crisis, but also if you just need somebody to talk to. So for example, if you're not 100% certain on what you can look up, things like distress lines or crisis lines are a great starting point. And again, just including your city or your region. For example, if you're located in the GTA, it does have different region telephone numbers or text lines. And again, that will all be shared on the resource sheet that we'll be sending out after we wrap up tonight.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to thank the panel. I think we've come to our time on the clock and covered, I think, most of what we intended to get to. If there's anything else, we could always set up another talk another time. I'm sure we could find other things to go over on very different topics, I'm sure. Does anyone have anything else they want to add? Final comments, anything like that quickly? Everyone wants to get to watch a show or something?
No. I just say go watch some comedy too. Like laughter's good medicine too. So
yeah. I was going to say I found myself just working from home the last few years. Sometimes just leaving the house for a coffee instead of making a coffee in the house. The fresh air, interacting with humans, like get out of your little bubble is what I found myself personally, just because my commute is about 30 feet now. I've got dogs, don't need to leave the house. You know what I mean? We've got these different ecosystems than we had 4 or 5 years ago. And I think we need to get back out and hang out with our friends and arrange a game or something, or a movie, or get out of the house a bit. So that's my general comment. So thank you all once again. Thank you for being part of the panel. Thank you to everyone in the audience for hanging in. And I think we've got a large group still out there. So thank you all. And I hope we can provide some assistance here tonight. And I guess till next time, well, thank you all and have a good evening.
Thanks, Lance.
Bye for now.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.